So with his speech for Melbourne Open House, will you please welcome MattK with Melbourne Open House.
In just over 2 weeks' time, all Melburnians will have a once-a-year opportunity to visit and discover some of Melbourne's best buildings at the 2012 Melbourne Open House event. Over the weekend of the 28th and 29th of July, over 100 buildings in the CBD will be open for all people to walk through and visit, in what is a rare opportunity to discover historic, architectural and engineering marvels that make up the landscape of Melbourne. So in 2 weeks' time, the doors of historic churches, synagogues, missions will be flung open. Exclusive clubs and out-of-the-way pubs will be accessible to all. And visitors will be free to explore rooftop gardens and subterranean infrastructure as 100 buildings around the CBD take part in this year's Melbourne Open House. So for those of you that haven't heard of Melbourne Open House or have never been to Melbourne Open House, it's a great annual event where you grab a guidebook and walk around the city and look through all types of buildings throughout the city. So buildings that you may have looked at for many years and wondered what's inside that building. This is your opportunity once a year to go and have a look what's inside them. So historic churches, theatres, Art Deco buildings from the 1930s, and even new office skyscrapers that are the pinnacle of modern design. It's all free for you to go and have a look at in about 2 weeks' time. This is the 5th year of the Melbourne Open House, having started in 2008 with just 8 buildings along Swanston Street. In 2009 there were 33 buildings, 2010 55, last year there were 75 buildings, and this year there's over 100 buildings. The concept of opening buildings to the public actually started in London in 1992, with the aim of fostering a better understanding of architecture and also the built environment by getting people, the public, to actually walk around the city and walk through buildings and see architecture in its natural state. Started by an architect, of course. There are now more than 30 cities with annual open house events around the world. So London's the biggest. You've also got New York, Dublin, Chicago, Helsinki, Tel Aviv and Lisbon, to name a few. So London's still the largest open house event in the world, with over 700 buildings open in London this year. The open house this year is in September. And Brisbane in Queensland is actually the newest city to join the open house program, with its first open house in October this year. So some of the buildings that you can see at this year's open house in Melbourne include the State Library. You can actually get inside the parts where you can't normally go, the upstairs abandoned reading rooms. The Melbourne City Baths near the Vic Markets. Backstage at the Rod Laver Arena. The Supreme Court Building. The underground Russell Street Power Substation. The Peter McCallum Radiation Bunkers. And the Windsor Hotel, to name just a few. I've been to three of the last 4 Melbourne Open Houses, so they just keep getting better every year with a lot of new buildings opening all the time and coming on. Some of the highlights from my previous Melbourne Open Houses included sitting in the Lord Mayor's chair in the council chambers in a 100-year-old carved chair and banging the gavel. Visiting the subterranean ballroom at the Regent Theatre. That was abandoned for many years and actually had about a foot of water in it for about 30 years until it was restored, and it's beautifully restored now. Having a beer at the Mission to Seafarers at Docklands, that's that building you might have seen. It's an old grey building with a dome on it, which has been continuously operating since 1916 as a seafarers accommodation, so when their ships in port, merchant sailors will come and stay there for that time. Another highlight was standing on the portico of the Melbourne Town Hall. That's the first level of the Melbourne Town Hall. Standing where the Beatles stood back in 1964, looking out at 20,000 screaming fans down on the street below. Or a tour of the Royal College of Surgeons up near Fitzroy Gardens, and viewing some antique medical equipment that was used in very early days, like very early goldfields, amputation equipment like saws and so forth. So very interesting. Visiting the Denmark House in Little Birch Tree, which is at the top of the building, looking at the unique Denmark of the Danish design and artwork. And one of the best ones, walking through the ANZ Gothic Bank on Collins Street, which was Melbourne's first stock market and built back in the 1880s. So a very interesting group of buildings you can look at. This year they're expecting about 100,000 visitors to attend the Melbourne Open House, but for most buildings there's no queues, there's no people lined up. For most buildings you just walk straight in and have a walk around. You don't require a pass, you don't require a ticket or anything like that as well. Some of the smaller sites, or the confined sites like the underground substations, you have to line up for 15 minutes to half an hour. But definitely well worth the wait if you want to have a look at how the underside of the city really works. It's fascinating. You can visit just a few buildings if you like, or you can get around about 25 to 30 per day if you're pretty quick. Walking pretty briskly and moving through each building quite quickly. Just got to make sure you wear pretty good shoes and pick up a guidebook or one of the many classes around the city. There's also about an army of about 600 volunteers that will be around the city this time as well, so wearing probably purple or green shirts this year. They can direct you where to go. They've also got a wealth of information about the buildings that each one of them is manning. So the Melbourne Open House in 2012, Saturday and Sunday the 28th and 29th of July, a little over 2 weeks away. As a well-known Melburnian says, do yourself a favour and get along to this great event that only comes around once a year. Fascinating event. Great opportunity to get out of the house, take your family with you, and discover many of the great buildings that Melbourne has to offer. It's Melbourne Open House 2012.